He won the Oscar. He starred in the biggest films. And he stood at the podium, raised the climate flag, told the world, "Our time is up." Then a private jet landed. A yacht pulled in. A caption popped up. Leo's carbon footprint. True. Social media feeds that once flooded with Titanic, Sichon Chand or Sanindyain Sitin Han Leo have shifted to hypocrite? Cancelled? That was the moment Leonardo DiCaprio realized something fundamental had changed. His platform no longer bought him goodwill. A generation that worshipped his name now asked a simple question. Does your lifestyle match your message? For decades, Leonardo DiCaprio has held a unique position. A-list movie star, serious actor, global environmental advocate. He built his brand on big roles and bigger statements. He used the limelight to amplify climate awareness, to prod the wealthy and the powerful, and to stand in the gap between celebrity and social responsibility. And in today's story from Star Gossips, we dive deep into that turning point. The moment when the man who once ruled Hollywood's heart realized that his influence, his message, and his audience were no longer perfectly aligned. Yet quietly, a rift widened. What once felt like a consistent narrative, Star Rises, Gives Back, began to show cracks. Younger audiences, especially Gen Z, who don't separate public persona from private action, began pacing. They looked and waited for coherence, and they found troubling patterns. One of the most cited examples: DiCaprio's private jet trip from Cannes to New York to pick up a Clean Water Environmental Award. The trip was around 8,000 miles. He had just addressed the UN about fossil fuels, yet then hopped a jet. That contrast landed like a punch. More recently, in early 2025, DiCaprio faced fresh backlash after evacuating from California wildfires via private jet, while his climate advocacy profile remained high. The optics mattered. For Gen Z, social media native, value-driven, highly attuned to hypocrisy, the message was plain. If you preach one thing and live another, you're on borrowed time. And so the moment arrived. The moment where admiration began to turn into scrutiny. The moment when a star realizes the culture around him no longer moves the way it used to. Leonardo Wilhelm DiCaprio was born in 1974, grew up in Los Angeles, and by the mid-1990s, he was already more than just a promising actor. He was the next big thing. Roles in this boy's life: Romeo plus Juliet. Titanic established him as the heartthrob with substance. His ascent was not short of mythic. The kid from LA who made it big story. Directors trusted him. Audiences followed him. Critics elevated him. And then he started using his platform for something bigger: environmental activism. The founding of the Leonardo DiCaprio Foundation, speaking engagements at the United Nations, documentary production, it all reinforced the idea that DiCaprio was more than a star. He was an agent of change. This dual brand, actor plus activist, built tremendous trust, until trust became a liability. Because once you say, "I will save the planet," people will eventually check whether your private life follows the same script. His rise had been near seamless, but the cracks first became visible when the very pillars of his brand, fame, activism, dating, prestige, began conflicting with each other in plain sight. For DiCaprio, the moments when his image slipped weren't one-off scandals. They were public contradictions foreshadowing something deeper. In 2016, at the Global Citizen Festival, DiCaprio delivered a stirring speech about climate change, declaring, "This is the most urgent threat facing our entire species." The words landed with gravitas, but the optics weren't flawless. Critics soon zeroed in on images of DiCaprio arriving at events via private jet and lounging on yachts, triggering a wave of backlash. Fast forward to early 2025. Wildfires were ravaging Los Angeles, and DiCaprio chose to evacuate via his private jet to Mexico, alongside his partner and family. Social media users were quick to judge. "The eco-warrior shows his true colors," read several posts. Later that year, his appearance at the lavish Jeff Bezos-Lauren Sanchez wedding in Venice, an event reportedly serviced by some 90 private jets and thousands of tons of carbon emissions, kicked the hypocrisy narrative into high gear. Social media called him fraud and greenwashed celebrity. These incidents didn't just reflect bad judgment. They signaled a misalignment between brand and behavior, which for Gen Z raised a fundamental question: are you part of the problem you claim to be fighting? Parallel to the climate contradictions was DiCaprio's repeating romantic formula. Older star, younger model. The age gap stories had circulated for years, but in the 2020s, they turned into social media shorthand for privilege and power imbalance. One 2023 report noted how DiCaprio was rumored to be linked with a 19-year-old model. A 29-year age gap. Media reaction was swift. "He could literally be her father," read one headline. Reddit threads exploded with commentary. The longer this all goes on, the less his situation looks even vaguely love-related. It looks like a pattern of swiftly replacing one model for the next once they hit a specific age milestone. And for Gen Z, these weren't just celebrity rumors. They were proof of how someone could appear progressive and woke, and still operate inside an old-school system of privilege. The dating story morphed into the image of a man refusing to age, surrounded by youth and avoiding accountability for power. Dynamics. When an actor once dominated online conversation, when every meme and tweet seemed to revolve around Leo this or Leo that after his Oscar win in 2016, the failure to engage younger audiences became noticeable. One 2025 analysis reported that his YouTube channel launch flopped. A few thousand views on posts about climate and activism despite his star power. That gap mattered, because influence in the digital era isn't just about star status. It's about participation, authenticity, alignment. When the audience sees misalignment, they disengage. For DiCaprio, the turning point came when the applause faded, and the questions began. Why is this guy still the branding hero if he's no longer playing by the rules? The roof didn't collapse in a single moment. Instead, it cracked. Quietly at first, then with finality, as the patterns DiCaprio had lived behind became visible in full light. This is when Gen Z stopped merely noticing and began reacting. By 2025, DiCaprio's every move was subject to a new kind of scrutiny. Not just red carpet looks or film choices, but lifestyle choices. One viral moment: his comment that despite being 50, he feels 32. The internet responded with a wave of jokes and mockery. Aged star, young date, same narrative. In parallel, a chart showing Leo's girlfriend age versus his age proliferated on TikTok and Twitter. The women he dated rarely older than 25, while he moved into his late 40s and 50s. The criticism wasn't just about age, it was about pattern. Long-term observers of internet culture noted that when a celebrity repeats the same behavior, the audience stops defending and starts cataloging. One Redditor put it bluntly, "The longer this all goes on, the less his situation looks even vaguely love-related. It looks like a pattern of swiftly replacing one model for the next once they hit a specific age milestone." These memes and social charts chipped away at his aura. His name, once a symbol of prestige, became shorthand for celebrity playing by old celebrity rules that Gen Z no longer tolerates. Around the same time, DiCaprio's attempt to connect directly with younger digital audiences via his YouTube channel flopped. Launched in March 2025, his channel had an initial subscriber count of just over 2,400, a tiny fraction compared to his tens of millions of followers elsewhere. Why does that matter? Because in the digital era, cultural relevance is measured not just by names, but by engagement. When your core audience stops responding, your brand begins to age. That's what happened here. DiCaprio's name still opened doors, but fewer opened willingly. Simultaneously, the eco-warrior tag he'd worn proudly began to feel heavy with irony. His attendance at Jeff Bezos Sanchez's lavish wedding, reportedly serviced by nearly 90 private jets, revived the eco-hypocrite narrative with renewed force. For Gen Z, this wasn't only about one big event. It was proof that behind the rhetoric, the actors' behaviors hadn't shifted. The consequence? Trust eroded, and cultural currency followed. As the laughter and critique mounted, the film industry's perception of DiCaprio began to shift too. Talent agents, studios, and digital platforms increasingly looked for authenticity. A star who aligned with Gen Z's values, not just carried their dreams. The actor who once was the apex of prestige found himself being weighed not just for his past glory, but for current relevance. Additionally, the climate advocacy space, his once safe domain, became more crowded with younger voices who accused older figures of leading the charge while flying the private jet. The moral authority he once held was diluted. The quiet but decisive signal was this: when your public image becomes a liability, your choice of roles, endorsements, and social platforms tighten. And for DiCaprio, that meant fewer wins in the digital native court that defines today's fame, but celebrated by fewer as the cultural conversation moves on. Here's the truth. The moment when Leonardo DiCaprio realized Gen Z canceled him might not have been a single meme or article. It was the moment when his brand stopped being a buffer and became a target. When his silence, his patterns, and his private decisions started speaking louder than his speeches. If you're watching this, whether a creator, a star, or simply part of the audience, one thing is clear. In today's culture, consistency trumps charisma, action trumps acclaim, and values trump visibility. Leonardo DiCaprio's journey isn't over, but it is changing, and the rules of relevance have changed with it.